Continuamos con las reglas especiales del pretérito. These rules differ from what we learned in the previous video, which applied to regular forms of preterite verbs. But what follows in this video are the special rules, such as the 4 categories I have listed here. So we have irregular verbs, verbs with spelling changes, verbs with irregular stems, and stem-changing verbs. This video will go into more detail on all 4 of these categories. Our first category is irregular verbs. There are 4 irregular verbs in the Spanish preterite. You'll notice that none of these forms have a written accent. So 2 of those 4 irregular verbs are ser and ir. You'll also notice that ser and ir are conjugated exactly the same. After ser and ir, we have our other 2 irregular verbs, which are dar and ver. Again, you'll see that none of these forms have a written accent. Our second category is verbs that have spelling changes. So the first grouping of these verbs are ones that end in car, gar, and zar. They experience a spelling change in the first person singular yo form, mostly for pronunciation purposes. So as you can see with buscar and llegar, car, buscar, changes to QUE to keep that hard k sound, busque, and llegar, GAR, changes to GUE to keep that hard G sound, gay, llegué. Additionally, empezar, our zar verb ZAR, changes to say, empecé, again to keep that pronunciation correct. Vamos a practicar. Go ahead and pause this video and fill in the blanks with the appropriate forms of sacar. I'll switch to the next slide now that has the answers. As you can see, the to form, tu sacaste la basura esta mañana, is normal, if you will. But then you see our yo form, yes, I took it out. Si yo la saqué has our spelling change to the QUE from the car, CAR verb. Here we have another example using the verb jugar. If our car, gars are verbs, this is a gar verb. So pause this video and fill in the blanks. As we can see, anoche yo jugué los videojuegos solo. We have the yo form, so we have our spelling change. But then we have, pero mis hermanos jugaron juntos. And because mis hermanos are not the singular yo form, they do not experience the spelling change. Under this same category, we have more verbs that have spelling changes. And these verbs, you can see that there are 5 of them, are essentially verbs that end with 2 vowels and then are R, infinitive ending. So EER, for instance, is the verb leer, as we see below. AER is our verb caer. And as we can see, the spelling change only happens in the third person singular and plural forms. So we see a change from an I with an accent to a Y. Leyó and leyeron, cayó y cayeron. You'll also notice that the third person plural form is the only form that doesn't carry an accent mark of some kind. We also have an example of an OIR verb, such as oír, and we can see that the same pattern happens here. Our third category has to do with verbs with irregular stems. There's a group of verbs, kind of a long list, that I'll show you in the next slide that have irregular stems, but here you can see the proper endings. Once again, you'll notice that with these special rules, a lot of the times we do not see a written accent on the forms. So estar is our example verb here. And on this slide, you can see, again, those irregular endings that were in the same slide before, but we have a more exhaustive list here of our verbs that have irregular stems. You can see that I have a little star next to hacer. That's because the stem is works with all the forms except for the third person singular el form. That becomes iso. That becomes iso. That is the only difference there. It just experiences a spelling change in that third person singular form. We have more verbs with irregular stems that fit under this category. For instance, when the third person plural form ends with a J, we use the ending eron instead of ieron. For example, the verbs decir and traer have a J in their stem, and so we see that in the third person plural form, we don't have dijeron, but dijeron, and then trajeron también. One other verb that acts like the two previous is conducir, and really any verb that ends in ducir, like traducir, to translate, is going to follow the same pattern as we can see here. Finally, our fourth category has to do with stem changing verbs. IR verbs that experience a stem change in the present tense also change stems in the preterite. In the preterite, this stem change happens only in the el, ella, usted and the ellos, ellas, ustedes forms. In other words, in the third person singular and plural forms. So as we can see, sentir is a verb that stem changes from E to I. We can see that that only happens in the third person singular and plural forms. And with dormir, our stem change from O to U, the same thing happens. Now, I've mentioned a few times in this video that in a lot of these special rules, we don't see a written accent. But with these stem changing verbs, our accentuation rules are the same as they were with the regular verbs. So as we see, we have an accent on the first person singular form, the third person singular form as well. Vamos a practicar otra vez. So here we have a couple more examples of stem changing verbs for you to practice. Feel free to pause this video so you can quiz yourself on the answers, and the next slide will have those answers for you. As you can see, here are the answers that you would need. The vosotros form does not have a stem change because that only happens in the third person singular and plural forms. But as we see, number 2 is a third person plural form, and we have a stem change from E to I, pidieron. One more example is the verb morir, which is another stem changing verb. So if we were to say Selena died in 1995, how would we conjugate this verb? Feel free to pause your video, and the next slide will have the answer. And as you can see, Selena murió en 1995 is our answer. That's all we have for the reglas especiales for the preterite tense. Hopefully this video will help you to study, as those forms will be present at any time that you're doing the preterite form.